Good morning, Tobago. On to Tobago updates, viewers. It's a very interesting morning. This morning, definitely have some good news that the Cabo Star is back in service. It made its way back down to Trinidad in the wee hours of the morning, and it took down quite a lot of trucks that were waiting to go down because, as you know, over the last few weeks, only trucks with essential goods were allowed on any one of the available vessels. And that meant that if a truck came up to Tobago and it emptied, it was not allowed on, as well as depending on the weight limit of the truck. Though those vessels were not allowed, those trucks were not allowed on the vessels either. So it was quite a lot of them that were very anxious to get down to Trinidad. Now, of course, we know that not it's still going to be a while before things equalize here in Tobago. Just because the vessel came back yesterday does not mean all is well today. So we're hoping that as the next few days and few weeks, we can get the stock back up here in Tobago, and things could come back to some bit of normalcy. But this whole conversation over the past few weeks have raised some concerns among some of the political commentators, analysts, etc. within our space. And one of our political commentators, or activists, I should say, is Mr. Anthony James. And he's on with us this morning. So a special good morning and welcome to you, sir. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. A very pleasant morning to you. I'm fine.
Great. So we're speaking about this whole situation right now.
Mhm.
You believe that the breakdown of the sea bridge, or the breakdown of the Cabo Star, I should say, and the disruptions in getting cargo across Tobago
Mhm.
gives credence to the need for the rise of secession talks.
Not at all. Yeah, not at all, at all, at all. What needs to happen is that Tobago has to come to power. Secession is an emotional response, an emotional reaction. It's not even a thought, actually. I think it's based upon the fact that we have heard that in the space. And the first mention of that, where Tobago and Trinidad are concerned, did not originate in Tobago from any Tobagonian. It was in the time in the 70s, and I think just after the 1976 general election, when the DAC, led by the late great Ian Robinson, would have won the two Tobago seats, and the PNM felt rejected Dr. Eric Williams, that strong Trinidadian leader. And he would have said, if Tobago want to go, that's, I'm trying to mimic his voice. I don't know if you've heard his voice on tapes, and that's the way he deported himself. He said, if Tobago want to go, let Tobago go. Tobago shall eat grass. He said so. Right? So that happened after the 76 election, but he did not come from Tobago, because he felt jolted and hurt that Tobago voted against him and voted, for his nemesis, in Robinson. So if you look back, Robinson, who was the principal of the Tobagonian struggle at the time, and his vice principal was another great Tobagonian, Dr. Winston Murray. Dr. Winston Murray, who was kicked out of the parliament within that very term. Between that term from 76 to 81, he was dismissed from the parliament because of the strength and dignity of his contributions. And so that he would have departed for the United States, and he came back and took up residency again in the late 1990s, somewhere around late 98 to 1999, and he established the Tobago Community College. And when he came back, he advocated a system called federalism. He said there ought to be a federal system between Tobago and Trinidad, which has nothing to do with secession. He had come out from that because he lived in the United States, which has a federation, and the most successful federation the world has ever known, the United States of America, where each state governs itself. All right, the 50 states, and at the head of that, you have a federal government with a a president of the Federation of the United States of America. So you can see from that, no way did that conversation come out from Tobago. And the Tobagonians of today have to be very careful because many of them are speaking out of turn. Now, before Robinson and Dr. Winston Murray, the person who really highlighted and started the Tobago struggle is the one where the park up at Burnett Street is named after, APT James. And in the parliament in the 1940s, he made these statements. And I only got to know these things by my association with Dr. Winston Murray. That's how I got to know. Because these things are not published in Tobago. We don't know the contributions that our representatives have made in the parliament in Trinidad. And he said, Tobago is not a part of Trinidad. He realized Tobago is a ward, but he's speaking in the sense or in the tense that it ought not to be. And from his own freedom tense, he said that Tobago is not a part. And in reality, we are not. It's just because of this system of bondage jurisdictionally, Tobago falls within that. So he said Tobago is not a part of Trinidad, but rather Tobago ought to be partners with Trinidad. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
And then when you look at what Dr. Winston Murray said, it's coinciding because a federation is a partnership.
So then, with this situation where we had such a shortage of food on our shelves over the past few weeks, and not just food, I mean construction materials,
everything,
or just regular goods,
everything,
right? Then how does this situation fit into the context of the governance structure that we should have between the islands?
That is it. And so that APT James said it first. He identified it. He said Tobago and Trinidad ought to be partners. Okay? And Dr. Winston Murray went a step further and said a federation. That's the official political language. Right? What is missing here is that Tobago does not have power. And Tobago, as I've said in other forums, if I may use the word instead of fora, Tobago, as I've said, Tobago is not the subject in its own sentence. If we go back to primary school, where we learn at that time, they said there are more now, but they said at that time that there are 8 parts of speech. You remember that? The first one, they begin with subject, verb, object, predicate, and all preposition, conjunction, these things. Now, what's the function of the subject? The subject is the controlling noun. The controlling noun of the sentence, of the story, because life is a story. This is a story being played out here. Who are the subject? So that Tobago is not the subject, because the subject determines the verb. The subject determines the purpose. They call the purpose in what we learn the predicate, because it is predicated upon, or the premise. I'm just giving better language than the teachers would have given us. The subject determines the purpose of the story, the purpose of the sentence. So in this sentence and paragraphs, statements, question marks, they all comprise a story, a short story. Tobagonians aren't the subject in that sentence. And it is wrong. It's a violation of human rights. It's a violation of what that organization called United Nations. Not that I have so much respect for that organization, really, right? But it's there in their charter that every people must govern themselves. What that simply means is that you must be the subject of your own center. You have to be the subject in your own center. You have to order yourself. You have to order your story, right? You look at what is going on now in Africa, right? Africa is rebelling against France and against Europe and against the United States. And it's all about decolonization. We live in an era that is supposed to be post-colonial. The principals in Trinidad, they know that. They are not ignorant of that. The context of the Caribbean is decolonization, because we are colonized. It's not where Tobago is concerned about devolution of power. Those in Tobago will think that we have to fix their minds. Right? So this is all about decolonization. But Tobago and Trinidad, even before Tobago got into a relationship, or not got into a relationship, became a ward of the British government of Trinidad, before Tobago became subject to British Trinidad, not native Trinidad, not the new native Trinidad we see in here, but British Trinidad. So since before that time, we had a relationship. And we continue to have relationship now, a long relationship. So to say, well, you're going to secede, you're going to break up, well, we have to define what that really means. All right? And you can't wake up tomorrow and secede because you have control over nothing. And not that you don't have control. The fact that you don't have control also implies that you don't have experience in certain things. What do I mean by that? I'm talking about institutions, because a government is a subset of institutions. You follow what I'm saying, Kandace? And my fellow Tobagonians, a government is a subset of institutions because we all feed collectively from institutions. You want water, there's a water authority. You want electricity supplied, there's an authority for that. And it is all constituted by law and by policies. You want to receive current, before TNTEC or the supply authority can connect you, you have to be certified and approved and so on. You have an institution for that. We have to build institutions here, and we have to practice to run institutions. And so we have to have an education system to supply the institution.
So then where does this leave us now? With this whole situation, we had a month of disruptions, and it affected us. And we had to wait for Trinidad,
This is it.
the authorities in Trinidad to make the necessary and to fix it and so on, and to even give us the MVM Plandedora and all those other things. But now it's fixed. So Trinidad is saying, okay, now everything is fixed, everything is back to normal, so you all should be good. But then how should we use this situation then to get that greater power and to even define the type of power that we need?
That's it, and that's why I began the subject being the subject in your own sentence. In fact, that has been the conversation. APT James and James Begart before him, they addressed that issue, and that is what informs the politics. But all of this comes down to leadership. You can only go as far as your leadership represents you, as your leadership allows you. Of course, there will be obstacles, but that is what makes life sweet. As Glenn Washington said in the song, the hotter the battle, the sweeter the victory. And there's a victory to happen. There's a victory. But I'm saying it comes down to leadership. What is going on now in the world? The world for the longest while has been a unipolar world, being run by the United States of America, who has bullied the world. And it is the dignity of Vladimir Putin and the dignity of Xi, who's in a real sense succeeding Mao Zedong, right? They are providing leadership, but it is all stems from a proper comprehension of world politics, and they are equipped with dignity. They are dignified, and because of that dignity and their strength, they are now changing the world from being unipolar to multipolar. So that we all know that in Tobago here, the leadership that has been elected or have been elected, they are the ones to make the overtures to the power structure in Trinidad and defeat the power structure in Trinidad. Because on the issue of right and wrong, the issue of every man has a right to defend or to decide his own destiny. In that judgment, there can be no partiality, Bob Marley thundered. So that Trinidad cannot defeat Tobago in an argument of the destiny, the right of the people of Tobago. Those that represent Tobago, however, must be able to carry that argument, to carry that fight. Once, because we have gone past Robinson, we have gone past Murray.
Yes.
We have gone past that era. We are in an era that now, this conversation has gone on for a long time. It's just how to jump over that final hurdle to go into to the promised land. But I'll tell you something. So what is needed is constitutional reform. The prognosis and the solution offered by APT James is what is necessary. It is a partnership. There are many Tobagonian families in Trinidad, Trinidadian families in Tobago. We have built up a relationship. We don't need to sever ties. You know what I'm saying? We need to fix that. We don't need to sever ties. That's the solution. The solution is coming in to power in your own circumstance. That is what has to happen.
And then how would you even evaluate how we handle it here in Tobago, how our leadership, meaning the chief secretary, and I mean, we could even bring in the minority, our representatives in the parliament,
yes,
our
excellent
senators.
point, yeah.
How did they then handle this situation and use it as a way for us to get that greater power that we deserve?
And it's an excellent point, really. It's like we do in dance, we have leads and follow. You know what I mean? So we have the leaders step and we have the followers step. And clearly that question there is really a follow from what came into the fray there. And if one has to be really honest here, and sometimes you speak here, and the trolls and them outside who are supporters of different, but they don't like you to speak the truth. But if the truth be told, there ought to be a unity. There should have been a calling together of everyone. That's leadership. You follow what I'm saying? The assembly has two sides. It ought not to be. There should be one side in the assembly there because the chamber is curvular, as Robinson observed.
Like the horseshoe.
The horseshoe is curvular. So Robinson said, it is not majority and it's not government and opposition, but it is majority and minority. He said the leader of the majority collects the views of the majority, brings it to the house. I was there for the speech. He says the leader of the minority collects the views of the minority, brings it to the house, and you discuss and you come to a consensus, because he said, I wish that Tobago remains in the hands of Tobagonians, because you realize there was a march in advance from Trinidad to colonize Tobago. He saw that and he was responding to that. So that clearly the House Assembly is designed for consensus. It's not you on one side attacking the other. There's no government and opposition. That's British thing. In Tobago here, we are one community here. We're going to each other's wake, funeral, wedding, whether we invited or not, because we are one family here in Tobago. And it is our culture that should inform and represent our politics. So that the House Assembly should have gotten together with the representatives of East as West. But only leadership, real leadership, can do that. You need a leadership to excel the quarrel, the antagonism that is now taking place. You need a leadership to soar above that. And the population must see that leadership, recognize that leadership, so that the population can rally and be led. You ask an excellent point, because that really did not take place. I saw and listened points, people arguing to still win the point, to win for PNM, win for UNC, win for TPP. It's all madness. We need now, as one people, to agree that something here is wrong. And what is wrong is that Tobago does not have power. We don't even have power over our own resources. That is what is going on in Africa again. That is the heartbeat of colonization, to rob people to teeth. Even though the scripture says, love your neighbor as yourself and thou shalt not steal. We live in Trinidad and Tobago, and people are raising the flag and so on in Tobago here and standing at attention. I don't regard the anthem. The anthem is marvelous and magnificent, but the Constitution contradicts the anthem. The anthem is brilliant philosophically. He's saying side by side, he speaks to the highest ideal, forged from the love of liberty and in the fires of hope and prayer. You know what I mean, Kandace?
Yes.
So that's what's going on, but the Constitution is saying, who wins Trinidad, Tobago is yours.
And that's an excellent point, that we'll have to pause this conversation. Stick a pin right there. But we'll be back right after this break. So viewers, please don't go anywhere.
Good morning, Tobago.
Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates. Viewers, we are continuing our conversations this morning with a political activist, Mr. Anthony James. And our topic for this morning is that, is it time for secession? Of course, this is in light of what happened over the past month with the breakdown of the Cabosat. Now, the Cabosat is back into service. Now, Mr. James says we don't need secession, even though there were quite a few people that was speaking about it. At least people within the population. You know, the people was considering, well, look at what's going on. Maybe that this is the time. But we only heard them at ground level. We didn't
Yeah.
hear a lot of voices coming forth, other than the business community, coming forth and then talking about the situation that we are faced with and what we might need to do to fix it.
So, where I stand, I believe in the philosophy of APT James in the context of Tobago and Trinidad. I believe in the philosophy of Dr. Winston Murray in the context of Tobago and Trinidad. Those two gentlemen propose a federation of Tobagonians and Trinidadians. And in fact, that is what ought to pervade the entire English-speaking Caribbean.
And we have an example of it in St. Kitts and Nevis.
Right? And you also have it, the one that I am promoting is what exists in the OECS countries. You see, because right here in the OECS, we don't speak about it because we don't look inside, we don't do introspection. And the OECS have a better relationship than Tobago and Trinidad. They respect each other and so on. Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent,
Grenada.
Dominica, Grenada. They have a marvelous relationship. They are all playing their sports by themselves. They have their own prime minister, head of states, and so on. But the things that they do together and the mutual assets, they set up mutual committees to deal with that. But they maintain their independence. So you don't need any federal government. You need a federal structure. So in official language, it is called a confederation. That is what existed in the United States before they became a federation. Because the United States used to be before a confederation.
Yes.
And they have the Confederate flag and all of that. You know what I'm saying? So we need to become better students of politics. And sometimes what happens here is that you have people who go on into the politics, but they're really not students of politics. And they go in there and they are failing, and their supporters are supporting them ardently, but they can't do the job. They can't do the job because you're not trained overnight. This takes baptism. This takes time to be converted. Even Jesus Christ's disciples, they were around him for the duration of his ministry. And at the end of it, he said they were not converted. So he told Peter, when you are converted, strengthen the brethren. So, and that conversion only came when the spirit of salvation came into them. And in Tobago here, that spirit has to enter. And so that you become now, to this way, you become unrepentant. And that you're willing to give your life for it. But we need an understanding. We need knowledge, wisdom, understanding to carry this job. One of the things I must say instructively is that, some time ago we were caught up with this 2/3 argument. We have to have 2/3 support from the parliament in order for us to be free. Like Trinidadians and the parliament must decide. And if they never have a 2/3 majority, we can't be free. But that is absolute rubbish. 3/5 majority, 3/4. That is absolute rubbish. And we are not part of that Trinidad parliament necessarily.
But not only that, when I look at some of the discussions that are happening on a CARICOM level, because right now there's that push for us to establish the CSME. Even though we already have it, but to push that forward, right? We're not seeing Tobago in those conversations, really. We're seeing it from the Prime Minister's perspective, and we're seeing all the different leaders of the region trying to see how they can make it happen, but we're not seeing Tobago in that.
Tobago is really a shadow, eh? I mean, whether we like it or not, this is where we are, and Tobago has to born. We have to be born into the world community. We have to be born as a nation. This is what we're really fighting for. We are fighting to be recognized, to have a life that is Tobagonian. We have to be born. So it's very instructive. I'm saying this for the benefit of Tobagonians, so we could understand. I want to hammer this point home. We are not necessarily part of that Trinidad Parliament and the Trinidad Constitution. Robinson won that fight. It was always like that. We were never part of it. Tobago was co-opted We're not part of that. We live in our own country. Tobagonians live in their own country. 114 or 16 square miles here. This is our country. And the name of our nation is Tobago. Our country is an island country. That's the only geography. Our home is an island country. But we live in our home, our country. Whether the house is made of steel or wood or blocks. That's the island there. Britain is an island. You don't hear them talking about the island and the island, the island, and on the island. This is a slave language that you have been saying in Tobago here. Is the language of the dispossessed. We have to come in psychologically to possession and call the house a home, call the island country. Because before 1889, and in fact, even from 1889 into the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, we were still known as country here. My mother referred to Tobago as country. It's late with the bombardment and the advent of media in Trinidad, and they're referring to Tobago now. They were not speaking to Tobago. They are reading the news in Trinidad, speaking to a Trinidad audience, and then they refer to third person Tobago on the island. We looking in now and interpret that as first person, and calling ourselves now on the island. We are on. It's crazy.
So at this point, and given everything that's happened, what should Tobagonians on the ground do? Because we understand that, maybe our leaders might have some work of their own to do. But what should us as Tobagonians right now do on the ground and see to push this thing forward for us to get that power that we need?
So I'm getting there. Let me just close off this question here. Right? Robinson won that argument in 1977 with the motion. He got the parliament to accept that Tobago is not legitimately part of that constitution when he moved that motion for self-government in Tobago. The only reason why you qualify for self-government is because you are a colony. You have your own land, your own nation, but you're in a colonial relationship. We follow that there? So Robinson established that, and that is on the parliamentary records. Therefore, we don't need any 2/3, 3/4, 3/5. What is needed here in Tobago is proper leadership from the leadership of government here. And I hear people saying, oh, the House Assembly is not government. Well, they all, I mean that from Martin George and Reginald Dumas and so on. Well, they have a lot to learn because a motion was moved for government. And government exists at different levels, not only at state level. You have local government elections in Trinidad. So you had local government elections, but you didn't have another government in Trinidad. You follow what I'm saying? Right? So that Tobago, what is needed here is that the leadership of the government here must engage. You have to declare our position here. But you can't declare your position if you don't have a constitution. And this is why I've said earlier o'clock, I've said it on my presentation, so I've said it here. The House Assembly ought to be engaged in robust legislation. The House Assembly ought to be a buzz of activity. You can't have self-government if you don't have your own constitution. If you're there and you're not utilizing your house to make laws. Self-government means that you have to have a judiciary. You have to constitute that. So the question is, what is the vision of Tobagonians? And is that vision being captured and led and carried in the house today? This is a question Tobagonians have to answer. We have to depart from the vile emotions. We have to come into a kind of sense right now. If we really want to hit the bullseye to pass over the River Jordan into that promised land. Because self-government cannot come from Trinidad. Self-government did not for the Israelites, did not come from Egypt. Can't come. You have to have a focused leadership that is keeping the eyes on the ball to go over. It is all now about self. We have to consider, there's a work that we have to do. What the Trinidad Parliament, what they have already done, they have done already. We have to do the rest. We have to constitute ourselves. This is no longer a fight about PNM. Oh, I don't like PNM. I hate them. This is not about that. That can solve nothing. And if you really want to get rid of PNM, you have to come up with your own philosophy so that when you get this philosophy here and your own constitution, the PNM is no more.
All right. Well, Mr. James, we are unfortunately out of time this morning. You said quite a lot, and I mean, I hope people are listening.
I hope so.
And thank you so much for being on with us, for sharing your opinions. And viewers, please don't go anywhere because we have a lot more coming up for you after the break.
To a brand new dawning as the passion start to rise.